President Saleh is in Saudi Arabia to sign a power transfer deal after months of unrest and calls for his resignation. Will this be a new chapter in Yemen's political deadlock or more of the same? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hazm Seeker. The Yemeni president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, has made a surprise visit to the Saudi capital to sign a long-awaited power transfer deal. It was brokered by the 6-member Gulf Cooperation Council, but Saleh has backed out of stepping down 3 times before. And what does this mean for ordinary Yemenis struggling to make ends meet? They say they're willing to endure hardship until they achieve their political goal. This report now from our special correspondent in Yemen, who we're not naming for security reasons.
For young activist Saleh al-Sharafi, this homemade tent is his small but precious piece of the Arab Spring. He is part of a massive sit-in to bring down Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh, and he's lived here since January.
10 months in this tent is a struggle, and it's life under the shadow of this tree, and even the struggle experience of water. I mean, rain. It rains sometimes and destroys everything, every single paper in this place, even the pictures of martyrs. Yes, destroys many things. But this struggle means for me, it's a simple sacrifice.
An English graduate, Saleh began translating foreign newspapers for other protesters.
I saw people, they help each other, they accept each other. They demand just for one logo, for one phrase, that Ali Saleh must depart Yemen.
The president flew to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday as international efforts to get him to sign an agreement to hand over power continue. Back in Sanaa, living in rows of tents, anti-government protesters are determined to stay until the president resigns and anti-corruption measures are implemented. They've even given the square a new name, Change. President Saleh has held on, refusing to sign a deal to quit after 33 years in power. Now life in the square is part protest, part carnival, and birthplace of a Nobel Peace Prize. Tawakkul Karman led the first protests here before being awarded the prize and is now abroad campaigning on behalf of the people here. Armed renegade soldiers roam the streets, but there is also face painting, traditional dancing, and even a huge market. People have been here so long, some of the protesters have started businesses to survive. Mahmoud is a builder by trade and came here 10 months ago to join the call for a new government. I set up this tea stall to make ends meet in the meantime, he tells me. And thankfully, business is good. I will not leave here until we have built a more civilized country, he added. Others like Saleh agree, saying they will stay here under their makeshift shelters until their voices are heard. For now, they sit and wait. Al Jazeera, Sanaa, Yemen.
Well, earlier this month, the Yemeni vice president made a sudden trip to the US, allegedly for health reasons. But later reports leaked about US pressure to urge the reluctant president to sign the deal. Then this week, Yemen's ambassador to the United Nations, Abdullah al-Saidi, resigned. He was the latest high-ranking member of President Ali Abdullah Saleh's government to quit in protest against the killing of demonstrators. This was after UN envoy Jamal Ben Omar, with support from US, European and Saudi diplomats, forged a compromise power transfer deal. There may also be another reason. For the past 2 weeks and the first time since protests began in January, forces loyal to President Saleh have suffered heavy casualties from dissident tribesmen in the Yemeni capital. The diplomats said Saleh flew to Saudi Arabia because the GCC Secretary General Abdul Latif al-Zayani refused to go to Sanaa to attend the signing ceremony. Zayani had been embarrassed before when Saleh kept dignitaries in suspense before refusing to sign the accord. Well, let's take a look now at that proposal put forward by the Gulf Cooperation Council. It says Saleh will hand over power to a deputy who is currently Abdurrabuh Mansour Hadi. Controversially, this would offer him immunity from prosecution, a clause activists and the opposition have consistently rejected. A unity government will be formed, which will include members of the opposition, and a presidential election will be held within 2 months after Saleh leaves office. Well, joining us now to talk more about all this are our guests. In London, Mohamed Qubaty, he's an opposition activist and former advisor to the Prime Minister of Yemen. In Leeds, Clive Jones joins us. He's a professor of Middle East Studies and International Politics at the University of Leeds. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. Mohamed Qubaty, I want to start with you. Now, we've been down this road before, of course, with Ali Abdullah Saleh, and 3 times he's agreed to cede power, and every time at the last minute he's refused to do that. So why should we believe that things will be different this time around?
I think it's quite necessary not to lose focus that we are dealing here with a man who is quite known to be deceitful, evasive, erratic, disreputable gambler. I mean, we know that the signing itself worries a lot of people. If we go back to his history, you know, in 1994, he signed the so-called agreement of accord and reconciliation in Amman, in Jordan. And 2 months later, he waged his war against us in the south. So the signing itself is not as a sign of a step forward. And the thing which is not clear till now in the whole mechanism which has been worked out by Jamal bin Umar is the real issue which has been a stumbling block for a long time. The question of restructuring of the army units and the restructuring of the security units which are under the control of his family. If these units are not restructured, I mean, the coming president, Mr. Abdurrabbo Hadi, would be just a hostage for these forces. I mean, a hostage for the president's family. So again here, it looks that this is a new phase of the so-called, I mean, the previous process, the protracted stalemate which the country has gone through and which is actually threatening the whole region to be driven into a civil war, which, I mean, is affecting the security and peace, not in Yemen, not even in the region, perhaps in the whole world at large.
Clive Jones, what's your reaction to this? Do you have any reason to believe that things will be different this time around?
Possibly, only in the sense that the president's departure for Riyadh seems to have been, how can one put it, come out of the blue, so to speak. But on the other hand, I fully agree with the comments regarding the army. There are so many unknowns with this agreement, not least, of course, the status of the president's family itself. We also have to take into consideration as well is that the agreement may have been reached with the opposition parties, with the General Meeting Congress, with the General Meeting parties, but that doesn't necessarily bring about agreement with those protesters on the ground who may feel that President Ali Abdullah Saleh is actually getting off lightly.
Yeah, a valid point there, Mohamed Qubaty. This is an agreement that was reached with members of the opposition, and they are not the protesters who have been out on the streets, who have begun this uprising since it all kicked off back in January.
Well, I think the protesters in the street do understand that again the bone of contention is the question of giving Ali Abdullah Saleh immunity or amnesty for all the crimes which he has committed against humanity. And that question, I mean, we believe that the UN resolution 2014 doesn't give such an immunity. So the only immunity he can get if he decides to stay in Jeddah or in Riyadh, besides Zain al-Abidin bin Ali, who has managed to run away from the law in Tunisia. But the whole, again, I would say that the youths in the streets and in the squares, they, especially after the events now in Egypt, they are very much aware that their own way forward to make sure that the goals of the revolution will be reached is by continuing to be in the streets and in the squares. And this is a phase. If they get rid of Ali Abdullah Saleh in phase 1 with less cost, then why not? But obviously their opposition to this deal is quite obvious, and what we are hearing now from today from Sanaa and from Taiz, that these youths are taking the streets again and they are protesting against giving such immunity. They are asking for the president to be caught and to be prosecuted.
Clive Jones, is it fair that basically as part of this deal, President Ali Abdullah Saleh gets off scot-free, that he's immune from any prosecution and not held accountable? And how will the protesters on the streets react to that?
Well, I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If he really does resign, and it does bring a modicum of calm, which will allow for free parliamentary elections to actually take place, then people may say, well, that's a price worth paying. If, on the other hand, this is just about a means by which power can be transferred to his family, and it still emboldens his own tribal clan, as it were, the Hassan Hashid, and still allows them to dominate the regime, and the regime continues to dominate the process of governance in Yemen, then people will once again take to the streets and protest. I mean, in all of this, I mean, we've just spoken about the opinions of the protesters and how the protesters may have their doubts about this particular deal, but we haven't even discussed, for example, the role of the Al-Ammar family, and Sadiq Al-Ammar in particular has been a focal point of opposition to the family, and this agreement doesn't seem to have or be condoned by the Al-Ammar clan itself.
Yeah, I mean, Mohamed Qubaty, we've got a number of things going on here as far as the volatility of the situation in Yemen. We have these youth activists and anti-government protesters on the streets of the capital, Sanaa, and other cities in Yemen, where it all began back in January, where they have been since then. And then we have these clashes between the various factions in Yemen, the army factions that have split off, and the Ahmar family and the general who sided with the protesters. How does that figure in to all of this? Is this basically just going to amount to a power grab between these different groups?
Well, it has at one stage looked as if it is a sort of confrontation within the previous power brokers within the regime. But I think again there, the Al-Ahmar, Sheikh Sadiq Al-Ahmar and his brothers, as well as Ali Muhsin, do realize that the youths in the street, they do mean business. They have been against all of these, centers, and they have, and Ali Muhsin Al-Ahmar, Ali Muhsin, the general, has come out and said, well, I'm ready to be taken to the court. I can stand prosecution. I do agree that I have taken part in a lot of these deceits which Ali Abdullah Saleh and ploys have played. The Sadiq Al-Ahmar and his brothers have said that we're willing even to leave. If Ali Abdullah Saleh and his family are ready to leave, we will leave with them. We don't mind, So all of these games are being in interplay for a long time. But the question is, I think, again, if the question of the power within the army and the security forces, where is that power going to move? As it has been postulated previously, it has been said that the powers running, to run these centers and these forces and these units would be in the hand of the government. If that happens really, then there is a way forward towards the interim phase, where we are looking forward to a dialogue, an inclusive dialogue, a comprehensive, inclusive national dialogue, which will work out a lot of the questions we have got in Yemen. Let's not forget that we have got the southern question. Let's not forget that we have got the Houthis. So we have got to come to a new, we have got to draw or formulate a new constitution, whereby the country should be heading towards a civilian government, towards a parliamentary system, and towards a federalist country. If that can be achieved, then there is a lot to be gained. But I believe that is going to only happen, it will not happen unless we really make sure that the restructuring of the armed forces and the other security forces do happen actually in the 90 days period, which is the first part of the transitional phase.
Well, Clive Jones, Mohamed Qubaty has laid out a scenario there that he would like to see happen. Is that how you would ideally want to see it as well?
Ideally, yes. I mean, Yemen has always suffered from weak governments and strong regimes. And if this 90-day period can bring about the process of fair elections, and I have to say fair elections that would be overseen by observers both from the Arab world and the United Nations, that there are that freedom of association, freedom of expression, without the involvement of the security forces could be assured, then indeed, I mean, this could be a new chapter in Yemen's history. But as has been outlined, there are huge problems here. There's a successionist movement in the south of the country, the so-called Hirak movement, which has been at odds with the central government in Sanaa, primarily over the allocation of central resources. There's a breakdown, if you like, in how those resources have been allocated over time, primarily because the oil economy, the process of patronage, which is based on the oil economy, is breaking down. And of course, from the external perspective, there's great concern in both Europe and the United States over the position of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So these are great unknowns, these are great imponderables, which certainly could derail any political process over the next 3 months.
Let's take a step back for a moment, away from the politics and the factional rivalry for a moment, and look at the reasons why all of this began in the first place back in January. What is the situation like for ordinary Yemenis as far as the economic situation and the social struggles and so on? What is it that brought on this uprising in the first place? That's to Mohamed Qubaty.
Well, let's, as perhaps I have noted previously, let's not forget that the whole issue in Yemen has been the disruption of the unity. You know, after the 1994 civil war, Ali Abdullah Saleh, instead of taking the chance, to move forward towards devolution, towards democratization, he sort of gained more confidence in himself, and he moved to a new scheme. He has got this new patrimonial, project of his, and after defeating us in the south, he suddenly moved towards, imposing his son and his relatives, in major positions in the government, and after that, the South has been, since over the past 17 years, it has been complaining of all the grievances that it has appeared against them. Hundreds and thousands of people have been thrown away from their jobs. The promises for decentralization and devolution has disappeared. It was just only a way of trying to quieten the people, and he paid lip service to this question of decentralization over the past, at least 10 years. He made some local councils, which actually they didn't have any power. And after and beyond that, the question of corruption has got worse and worse over the past years. So the economy has been slipping away. The actual standard of living has been getting worse all across the area. And in spite of that, he has been playing this game of trying to show that he is trying to reach a sort of agreement and consensus with the opposition parties. But for the past at least 5 years, since 2006, it has been shown that all these games and ploys were just, again, a waste of time. And he lost confidence of all parties which were playing with him in the parliament, and gradually he moved and he got himself into this position whereby he's confronted by everybody and leaving him only singularly with his clan and his family, opposing all the other forces in the country, political forces, social forces, everybody else has been standing against him. And that is actually, to go back to 2007, we in the south started the Hirak. There were more than 1,000 martyrs who fell down. And this question, I think, that the relation between the Arab Spring and what is happening now, the revolution and the uprising in Yemen, should be looked in a different way. I think, yes, the uprising in the Arab world has helped the turmoil in Yemen, but this turmoil has been going on at least underground for the past 10 years or 15, and then from 2006 it was quite clear that the country is going downhill towards anarchy if the president doesn't change course, and he has refused to change course over the past at least 2 years
Clive Jones,
of a dialogue with the opposition.
Clive Jones, how does this, what we're seeing in Yemen right now, figure into the larger uprisings in what is known as the Arab Spring, and why does the stability of Yemen matter in the region as a whole?
Well, I mean, clearly the uprisings in Sanaa, in Taiz, and indeed in Aden, they have taken heart and to some extent have copied the demonstrations in the wider Arab world, most notably in Egypt. I mean, that cannot be denied. But I just want to sort of go back to sort of contextualize this a little bit. There are several points of opposition that have emerged over Yemen in the past 7 to 10 years. You can go back to 2007, for example, and army officers who started protesting against the paucity of their army pensions in the south of the country. The increasing concern over the depletion of water resources is another great concern. And more particularly, and we talked a little bit earlier on about the issue of patrimony, but the waste of oil money to serve the interests of Ali Abdullah Saleh and his immediate family and his immediate tribe, and the way that they use that money to try to buy particular tribal leaders. And indeed, many tribes began to feel themselves alienated from those same tribal leaders. So all this became part and parcel of the wider turmoil that already existed in Yemen before the Arab revolutions. And then, of course, events in Tunisia, Libya, and more recently in Cairo have acted as a catalyst for this. In terms of, as I said before, in terms of the wider concerns, I mean, most people in the West in particular have concerns over the growth of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. But again, we need to understand that there are other Islamist opposition groups in the south of the country. And most of these Islamist opposition groups emerged in opposition to Ali Abdullah Saleh and were not, dare I say it, the surrogates of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So we actually need to disaggregate some of these so-called threats that the West perceives to be facing, particularly in the Hadramaut region of Yemen.
So just in the couple of minutes that we have left, Clive Jones, I mean, how do you see this playing out then over the long term? And is it important to look at this in the context of what is happening individually in Yemen rather than trying to compare it to the uprisings elsewhere in the Arab world?
It's a little bit of both. I think we have to take note of the influence and indeed the pride that many Yemenis now have in taking what they consider to be their fate into their own hands. But equally, when one looks at the history of Yemen and indeed Yemeni politics, I think in some ways it's best described as a shift in the political field rather than a revolution. It's not at all clear that even with the election of more representative government, that it can actually deal with the problems that it actually faces. It's going to need outside help, particularly from Saudi Arabia, but also the wider Western world. And the issue here for the West, for the United States, and for the European Union in particular, is the extent to which they will now link aid to conditional political and economic reform in Yemen itself. And that's the big challenge, to be able to do that, to meet the issues to do with resource depletion, lack of governance, with economic aid coming in from the West, because Yemen will need that aid.
Mohamed Qubaty, I saw you nodding in agreement to that. Are you confident that Yemen will get the outside help that it needs?
I think I do agree with what Clive has said, totally, you know. But I think the West and our friends in the States and in Europe and our brothers in the GCC, they have got to move away and shift from this wait-and-see, you know, approach which they had been dealing with the Yemeni question for the past 10 months. Things are getting very much bad on the ground. The economical situation is quite very bad. I mean, total disruption of the economy. The humanitarian question is really, I mean, dismal. And the whole issue which worries us, that Ali Abdullah Saleh might be just driving the country into anarchy and disintegration, which will threaten the whole region and the area. Our friends in the West have got to put the foot down and look within the concept of the the group of the Friends of Yemen, which has been laid here in London some 18 months ago, and look into Yemen and focus.
That is going to have to be the last word. We will certainly be following all the developments in Yemen over the coming weeks and months. It will be fascinating to see how all of this does play out. But I want to thank both of our guests for taking part, Mohamed Qubaty in London and Clive Jones in Leeds. Many thanks for your time. And that's it for this edition of Inside Story. Thanks for watching. Of course, we'd love to hear your views on this or any other stories. Remember, you can just send them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Latest news is up next. Bye for now.